Dr. Miklosh Bala from Israel. He'll be speaking on mass casualty incidents in nature-induced and man-made disaster, the management process. Dr. Miklosh is the Director of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery Unit, Department of General Surgery, Hadsa Medical, Center Faculty of Medicine, Hebrew University, Jerusalem. Did residency in General Surgery from Hadsa Medical Center. Fellowship in Trauma and Surgical Critical Care at R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, Baltimore, Maryland. Is an active member of AAST, ISTES, ISS, and Chairman, Israeli Emergency Surgery and Trauma Society. Dr. Miklosh, please.
And I would like to start my talk with the definitions. So mass casualty incidents and disasters are actually interchangeable. That means that most of mass casualty incidents are disasters for a community. But on the other hand, not all disasters are associated with the casualties. And I want to continue with the same definitions, and the events, both disasters and MCIs, could be progressive events or sudden. And the great example of progressive event is what we are facing today. It's like COVID pandemic. It occurs over the years already, and we have time to prepare and change our plan. And the medical response to the sudden events that are very common in all over the world. And in those events, actually, we are starting to taking care of casualties when the accident came to its magnitude. So we don't have time to prepare, and we have to save lives. And this comes back to the philosophy of mass casualty incidents: save as many lives as possible. And I'll come to that statement a little bit later and explain how to really define the philosophy of MCIs, management. The most mass casualty incidents are man-made, but also natural disaster as well. And you can see here in the pictures the well-known accidents, both from London, Madrid, and New York, of course, and Jerusalem. And the natural induced disasters actually are very common, and fortunately or unfortunately, most of those happen in Asia. And probably you people are most experienced in the world taking care of those type of disasters. And it's not that common in the Western world. But I want to focus on my talk on the experience that we gained from the Israelis emergency response. And I'd like to start the talk actually with an example. This was in 2001, the suicide bombing attack in the downtown of Jerusalem. So you can see here, about 15 people were killed and 7 children among them, and about 130 were injured and transferred to the hospitals. And we can see here in the picture a few ambulances and then fire brigade and a lot of people around. And this scene looked very devastating, injury to the people and property. And a lot of agencies came up to give a hand. And you can see here a policeman and EMC team, and in the background, the bomb squad, and even a doctor that came up to give a hand at the community hospital 1 block away from the event. And what that mean, all those things. So there was an example of lack of leadership and control. The bystanders do the best they want. The ambulances arrived, but was not synchronized and well planned. Many injured were evacuated to the nearest hospital that I was talking about, and this hospital can't even handle 10% of those. So this is an example of chaos. That's what we want to avoid in the management plan for the mass casualty incidents. And it's not about the medical issues, and I'm not going to talk about it at all. I would like to focus on the logistical problem that can be focused on in the mass casualty incident management. In different countries, there are a lot of players in the scene. It could be emergency agencies, medical authorities like Ministry of Health, different institutions that give training for responders. All acute care hospitals are involved in that plan management. All personnel that work in those hospitals is involved. And of course, and sometimes also the sort of like home front command in our country that connect between the civilian and the military healthcare systems. So it's complex. But the emergency plan is really based on 5 C's. The contingency planning. The planning is the first thing that you have to start with. And you have to plan what you expect to have. For example, we're not going to have tsunami, I guess. So we're not planning for that. And the second is a command and control or incident command, as differently can be said. Coordination between all agencies taking care of casualties at scene, cooperation between the agencies in scene and the hospitals, as well as building capacity at all levels of care. And the phases of mass casualty incidents are also very well explained and very well known. It always starts from chaos, and then it should be controlled by response and reorganization of care, site control, search and rescue, treatment and triage, and also transfer to scene, and then in the hospital level, and ended up with a structured debriefing that include all those players who are involved in a mass casualty event planning, for example, and all those phases are connected with a communication issue. So that means that you have to know whom to talk with and what to say, because if you have no good communication between the phases, you come back to the chaos. At our place, on-scene management is very simple. It's based on the safety agency that works in the inner cycle, where all care of patient, triage, and also safety issues can be handled. And then the patients are transferred accordingly to the severity of injury into auto cycle, and then transferred from there with the help of police into the hospitals. There are a lot of challenges at the pre-hospital stage. It could be simultaneous attacks, and there are a lot of examples of that. The last from Sri Lanka, for example. There could be a secondary explosion, and the safety is an important point in the taking care of scene. It's hard to make triage between alive and dead. Some people go and do triage themselves, and the bystander issue is also the important part, and there's a lot of efforts being done today to teach bystanders to take care of the people that may be injured around. I just want you to focus on that picture. It's from Madrid train bombing. And do you see any professional rescuers in that picture? I just make it bigger, and you don't see anyone. That means this is a reality. So at pre-hospital stage, there is no physicians. The EMS people make a plan for incident command, doing the initial triage, and making the minimal procedures. And our philosophy of pre-hospital management is to save and run. That means do minimal things that can save life, like airway control and the hemorrhage control, and then all the rest being done on the way into the hospital. And the hospital plan is probably the most important part of the mass casualty incident management plan. The hospital plan should be the same one for weekends, weekdays, holidays, and there's a lot of components in that. And I just want to focus on that slide on a few important ones. The one is to prevent patient flood in the hospital. You have to have your hospital still functioning during the mass casualty incident. And also the other thing is to assess your hospital surge capacity. That means you have to know how many resources you have at the real time. It includes staff, space, and supplies. And as I said, there are a lot more, and I will focus on some of them a little bit later. The hospital preparation principles are simple. It all starts with emergency department. So, and then come to personnel and resource recruitment. If you have a lack of both, it should be somebody who is available to take care of all management plan in the hospital, clear chain of command. Triage in the hospital is another important issue, and everything is alive only when you have live drills in advance. So what means emergency department setup? It's a simple clearing the space in the emergency department done by nurses and chief physician in the emergency department to make place for incoming casualties. And then you have to recognize that all hospitals in the world actually is the same, and they have the same kind of limited resources. The one is the personnel, the other is OR rooms, ER beds, ICU beds, and radiology suites. You have to understand those are bottlenecks of your management plan. You have to plan as to have things moving smoothly, and for that, just to make sure how does it work in my place, for example, we have an ambulance in docking area in the hospital. It's outside of emergency department, and there is a triage bay that is the physician or nurse that is able to do the triage is doing it very simply by dividing patient on red, yellow, and green. The red goes to the trauma unit, and they are need an immediate care. The rest go to the admitting area in the emergency department, and all walking wounded. You don't want them in the emergency department right now, and they have to be moved to the other place that should be prepared in advance, of course. And also, there is a concept that should be actually included in the regional or national disaster plan. We call triage hospital. As I showed in the previous slides, the small community hospital that is close to the event itself should be functioning as a resuscitation one. And after initial resuscitation, all patients should be moved from there into the high-level medical facilities. This concept works fantastically if there's a remote area and the close hospital is not available as a major trauma center, for example. And the key personnel in the mass casualty management in the hospitals are medical director, administrative director. The head nurse actually has a huge role in that management plan inside the hospital. And then also the emergency medical services coordinator. This is a gentleman or a lady that actually knows what the distribution of patients are in the scene and what the resources are in the hospital. And then this person actually give you an idea how many casualties you should expect to have in a real time. And the chain of command is done by medical director. We call it surgeon in charge. Actually, it shouldn't be a surgeon. It should be somebody who is able to do this kind of management. And he divides the patient into areas and then decided who goes where from the certain area into imaging site, operating theater, ICU, or other places, and then making a reassessment often to make sure that everybody get the right treatment. So what we learned on our experience actually that about 2/3 of the patients are walking wounded, about 1/3 are severely injured or moderately injured, and about 10% those who need a surgery at first 2 hours and are critically injured. Did come back to the statement that I was talking about this before. So what does it mean save as many lives as possible? Actually, you have to save those few sometimes that are critically injured and salvageable. And all the management plans should be focused to identify those few and allocate resources toward those few and save their lives. There are a lot of specific consideration when the event is not conventional. For example, hazard material, chemical event, radiological one, or the natural disaster. So the differences are a lot. So the number of casualties could be much bigger in the non-conventional disaster. Sometimes you may require the contamination and protect your staff. As well as external support, because the disaster itself may obstruct the support from outside resources. And also it's very psychologically challenging for staff and victims. And this is an example of non-conventional disasters done in our place. So the ambulance is arriving with the patients, and those immediately need immediate care go straight unprotected into the emergency department, and the rest go to the decontamination site, having the decontamination, and then crossing this yellow line goes as clean patients into the emergency department, as well as the staff. You have to have stores for that, very clearly labeled, and somebody who is taking care of that thing, that it's close to the emergency department and still functioning, of course. And this is an example of a radiation check that we do routinely for all mass casualty events. Not just radiation check, but also looking for different hazards. And some people are trained to do that, not just in drills, but also in real disasters as well. This came back to the concept that exists for about more than 10 years in Israel. This is a concept of all hazard approach. So the principle of for both human-made or natural disaster are the same. So you have the same admitting sites functioning, you have the same stuff that regardless of type of emergency knows how to work. We have a similar principles of doing the life-saving procedures in different kind of hazard approach, as well as in training programs that we're using in hospital in all over the countries. Just the same approach, but different hazards. So you can choose if you're gonna do the drill with a chemical hazard or radiological one, for example. Unfortunately, our country has some experience in different internal wars and conflicts, and it very interesting that it's give us an opportunity to build an integrated system connecting both military and civilian trauma worlds, and it's very unique. It came with immediate feedback. Those same people doing the same things, and they know how to talk with each other. The rapid implementation of technology is happened very quickly, and then trauma system is growing and is responding to any disaster that may appear. And thank for my colleagues from the Rambam Medical Center. Here is an example of what we learned from the conflicts. The parking garage in the Rambam Medical Center can be converted in the full-scale emergency hospital, probably the biggest in the Europe, at least 1,000 beds. And it's not just a drill, it's a real life. And last year in the COVID pandemic, patients were treated at that facility with the help of personnel from Rambam Medical Center, of course, and of course, military personnel as well. And I would like to conclude with some suggestions and statement that seems to me an important to the planning for mass casualty mass casualty incident management. The first, you have to have the one federal authority or somebody who is in charge of planning and response. The rapid evacuation to the hospital is important one. And then specific hospital plan should be at every hospital that's supposed to meet the requirements of a mass casualty incident management plan. You have to estimate your surge capacity in the hospital, prevent patients from flooding the hospital, as well as doing triage outside of emergency department, employ MCI philosophy as we spoke before, plan the family and medical media information center, sometime prepare to decontaminate. And of course, anything comes in a real life without drills. So live drills is a key issue. Nobody is able to be prepared just reading the books. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for Asia Trauma Collaboration for inviting me. And I would be able to answer questions later. Thank you so much.